Hello, hello.
I'm Savannah.
And I'm Elysia.
And this is Burden of Proof. Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, hopefully your Thanksgiving was really good and you ate yummy food. And
you didn't have a screaming match with your relatives.
yeah. So hopefully that went well for you.
Yeah.
And welcome to December, you guys.
December.
Can you believe that? That it's
No.
just like, that's crazy. This year went so fast.
It has.
I mean, insanely fast.
It has.
I can't even process that.
No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
especially because October just didn't count for us.
Yeah.
We had 2 hurricanes
just a blur.
and it was just a blur.
Yeah.
So it's not real. It didn't happen. So anyway, I don't think we have any other business.
Well, we don't have any other business because we're batch recording.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
It's not that far in advance. We're only 2 weeks ahead.
Yeah, it just feels a little, I don't know. It feels like not current, you know?
Yeah, it does feel weird.
For us, it's probably it's a lot weirder for us than it is for listeners.
Yeah, they don't care. We're batch recording because we have plans over Thanksgiving, and so we have to.
Yes.
Yep.
But anyway. Yay, December.
It's officially Christmas time. It's officially the Christmas season, which is my favorite season. So
mine too. Yeah,
it's time. And today we have a case for you. I have brought forth a case. It's very I'm really getting back to my roots.
Teenagers.
Yes, teenagers. It calls to me. I don't know why.
You love you some killer teenagers.
You'll see. I just felt like everything has just been so crazy lately with the holidays. And personally, I'm planning a wedding, which is just really getting to be intense, which is fun. I love it. But it's just, I need to get back to things that I love. But I don't love it. I
don't love it. I just love it.
It's a niche for me that I always come back to when I'm feeling a bit lost in this true crime world. And we did it with the Pizza Murders, and we're back with Danielle Locklear. So,
okay.
Let's dive right in, shall we?
We shall.
We are spending a lot of time in the Carolinas the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Last week we were in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and today Danielle is originally from South Carolina, but she had moved up to Hope Mills, North Carolina.
Okay.
To live with her grandparents and her aunt. Okay. So her mom in South Carolina was going through a really nasty divorce. And so she had spent the summer in Hope Mills and she worked as a camp counselor at a church camp. And she had talked to her mom when she came back and was like, I really like it here. I want to move here full time. I have friends here that I've established. And at the time she had started dating her boyfriend. And so the family decided, yeah, she's doing really well. Let's move her up to Hope Mills full time for the year so she can start high school there.
Okay.
So Danielle was a really beautiful girl and she fit right into a friend group when she started school. She was known for talking to everybody, generally being really kind. She was involved in ROTC and had straight A's. Like most high schoolers in 2014, she began watching YouTube videos and she was watching baking videos and would love to watch a Nerdy Nummies video and then bake it. And her family always said it turned out great. She was just one of those people that was really good at things that she tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Love some Nerdy Nummies.
We do. Shout out to Rosanna Pansino.
Mm-hmm.
Side note, have you seen what Rosanna Pansino is up to recently?
I have not. My kids kind of stopped following as they got older. And so
let me tell you what she's doing. She's decided to personally take on Mr. Beast.
Oh.
Mr. Beast put out all of these Lunchable type deals.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they were moldy. And she was like, this is disgusting. And she made a live video of unboxing a bunch of them and was like, look at this. She was outing him for predatory behavior, for faking certain things, blah, blah, blah. She has decided she's taking it on. So highly recommend checking out Rosanna Pansino. Yeah. Anyway. Also, I should clarify, I don't know for sure Nerdy Nummies was the channel she was watching, but that's what I was watching in 2014, so I'm assuming that's what she was watching.
My kids too.
I think that's what we were all watching in 2014. And prior to starting school, like I mentioned, she had been a camp counselor at their local church where her grandparents had been attending for some time. And it was there that she met Jamichael Malloy, who was her boyfriend. And his family had known her family for a really long time. Jamichael was a high school senior in nearby Fayetteville, where he was a really good student. He played varsity soccer. He'd always been really respectful of his elders, and he was planning on joining the Marines when he was eligible.
Okay.
So they do have a bit of an age gap.
I noticed that.
She's a freshman and he's a senior.
Mm-hmm.
But the families knew each other. They trusted
Mm-hmm.
Jamichael. They met at church.
Yeah.
And they were very typical high school teens in the fact that they were on again, off again. They would get into fights and break up, and then they'd be back together a couple days later. So they knew that no matter what was happening, it was very rare that they would actually break up for good. And the family was really close with him. They had him over a lot. Everything was fine. And he lived, so Fayetteville's about 30 minutes outside of Hope Mills. So it's a little bit far, you know? And like I said, he wanted to join the Marines, which makes sense considering Fayetteville is near an army base. So he was exposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to pick up our story on Tuesday, March 11, 2014.
Okay.
It was after dinner, and Danielle and her grandfather were winding down for the night when she asked if she could run down the street a couple houses down because she had a notebook that her friend Alexis wanted to borrow before she went to school the next day.
Okay.
That's pretty standard. My friends and I would swap notes all the time in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, sure. That's fine. Just come back. Now, he didn't realize it when he said yes, but it was 10 p.m. He had lost track of time because he was playing video games. And so she left and he was like, oh crap, it's 10 o'clock. I probably shouldn't have let her go, but she'll be back in just a minute. Well, she didn't come back right away, but it wasn't until the next morning that he called his wife, her grandmother, and her aunt, Gina. So her aunt and her grandmother had gone to Atlanta for a doctor's appointment.
Okay.
So they weren't there, but her aunt does say that she felt in the middle of the night before, this wave of just unease hit her and she couldn't sleep all night.
Oh, wow.
I guess it felt like the shoe had dropped when she got the call the next morning from her dad that said Danielle left last night and didn't come home.
Yeah.
So they immediately canceled their doctor's appointment and turned right around and headed home. And her mom did the same thing. She called, and her mom lived about 2 hours away from Hope Mills. They called and she immediately packed a bag and headed up.
Okay.
Right after he got off the phone with all his family, they insisted that he called the police. We'll talk about why in a little bit. And they called the police, and by the time everybody got to the house, the police were there. Okay, and the police were like, look, she's a teenager. She's 15. She may have just run off with a friend. They were not really adamant that they wanted to do much at the time. And the family was like, she would not have run away. This is not like her.
Yeah.
But of course, the police were like, we're not going to do anything about this right at this moment.
Yeah.
But the family was like, no. Or they sprung right into action. And the first person that her aunt called was Jamichael. So he told her aunt, Gina, on the phone that they had actually broken up and that they hadn't spoken in at least 2 days. She, again, wasn't shocked, but she felt like she had to touch base with him and be like, hey, have you seen her? And he was like, no, we haven't talked. I've been home with my friend.
Yeah.
We were at home, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, okay. So then she called the school, and the school told her that she actually hadn't been in class on Friday. So she had skipped part of her day, if not her whole day on Friday, which we now know it wasn't the whole day.
Mm.
So then she started thinking more and more about what happened on the 10th. Since she wasn't in school on the 10th, what else happened? Well, on the 10th, when Gina arrived home, she found Danielle rushing across the driveway. And when she said, hey, where were you? What are you doing? Danielle explained that she was coming home from seeing some of her friends. She explained that some of her friend group had been bugging her to go hang out at the creek nearby, and that it was a place a lot of the area's teens went to go hang out, and she had finally given in. She told her aunt, I don't want to go back, though, because it was such a mess. And her aunt was like, no, you're not going back there. It's not a good place to hang out. You're not allowed to go. Because it was kind of known to be like a degenerate hangout area. When her aunt remembered this, she decided that they needed to go down to the creek and check for any signs for Danielle. But she didn't know how to get there. So she grabbed a neighborhood kid and said, "Show me where the creek is."
Yeah, what part
Yeah.
and how to get there.
And how to get there. And he did. He agreed. So when they pulled up, I mean pulled up as in they walked there through the woods, as in pulled up as in arrived.
Yes.
The kid was looking and he points something out on the ground. And in the mud, the word help was written in the mud. Which is weird and kind of a weird coincidence. Like, it's just bizarre, and it just made them all very on edge.
Yeah.
They continued to look around the area to find trash, clothes that had been left behind by children who were swimming, fire pits, burn pits, beer cans, and even a towel that Chyna recognized was one of theirs. Like, Danielle had brought it from the house.
Oh.
So authorities had clued in a little bit more at this point, and they eventually went down to the house that Danielle was supposed to be visiting that evening with her friend Alexis. Alexis confirms that she didn't show up to the house, but she had seen her earlier that day at the creek. She pulls out her phone and scrolls through some of the pictures showing the officers, hey, this is where we were. There wasn't like a group picture, but one of the officers or her aunt, it's kind of vague when I look through sources on who figured it out. But when they zoom in on the like glasses lens of somebody, they can see at least 2 other pairs of legs. So they knew they had more people to talk to.
Yeah.
The officers were like, okay, if she's not at the creek, because they didn't think that they had any reason to believe she was at the creek that night, and she wasn't actually at her friend Alexis's house, maybe she went to her boyfriend's house. So now the police called Jamichael. And when they speak with him, he confirmed that he had broken up with Danielle and that she was taking it really hard. He said that he actually had to block her phone number and that on the night that Danielle went missing, he was hanging out with his friend Dominic Locke. He willingly handed over his phone to detectives, and when they looked through it, they found texts from Danielle that added a whole other layer to the story. It included text that she was pregnant with his child.
Oh.
However, they also saw texts indicating that he was at home, other girls texting him trying to make plans, he was texting other people, and his phone was pinging to their house. So,
yeah.
And Dominic agreed that they were there and his parents were home. So all signs pointed to him being at home that night.
Okay.
So they had to move on. Caroline, one of the other girls who had been at the creek, reported to police that, yes, Jamichael did break up with Danielle a few days before. And so now everybody's on the same page. We got like 4 different confirmations that they were broken up.
Okay.
So the officers were talking to all of her friends while Chyna had gone down to the creek with this neighborhood boy. And so now they kind of meet up, and she tells the authorities about the creek bed and decides to bring them down with her to go check it out. And on the second trip, she finds more evidence. She finds a sock that she knows belongs to Danielle because it was fuzzy, and it was a specific sock that she had just bought for her recently.
Okay.
She also knew that these were only socks that Danielle wore at night. They were not socks that she would have worn during the day. They were sleep socks. They're like big, you know.
One of my kids loves those kinds of socks. Yeah.
So this determines to her she was here in the evening. Because she would not have been wearing this otherwise. The other thing that was making them very wary and aware that this was no longer a runaway situation was the fact that Danielle was completely silent on social media, and this would not have been the case if she ran away. She was a social butterfly, and she and I are only like 2 years apart in age or so.
Okay.
And I know what I was doing online in 2014, and if I was running away, I would never have been silent on social media. Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, that was all the rage. Snapchat was super big then. There would have been some activity, and there was absolutely nothing.
Even if she took off, unless she's seriously trying to hide.
Right.
No teenager. I don't foresee a teenager being completely silent, because most of the time your parents weren't on those.
Right.
Especially the Snapchats.
Oh, yeah, especially the Snapchats. My parents weren't on Snapchat until at least 2016.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, they were kind of at a dead end. And this was a small town, and so the rumor mill began turning. They heard about a boy named Angel who was apparently at the creek that day with Caroline and Danielle. And apparently they, according to some of their friends, were canoodling, cuddling, kissing. But when they talked to him, he denies it. And in the evening, his alibi was solid. So they had to mark him off as a suspect. They even looked into Danielle's grandfather, considering he was the last person to see her. And they were weirded out that he hadn't reported her missing that night.
Yeah.
However, he had waited because he was under the impression that you had to wait 24 hours.
Ah, yes. We've talked about that.
Yes.
Not only that, but that's like the pot calling the kettle black, is it not? Even once he did report it, you didn't take it seriously at first.
So.
Even though you're supposed to.
Right. Well, when he called his wife and daughter, they were like, no, you need to call anyway. And that's why they called before the 24-hour mark. But that's why he waited. And I understand, his thought process.
A lot of people believe that. Yeah.
And they did eventually cross him off the list. Now, Jamichael was called back into the station, which he does without fuss. And he tells the officers that despite the fact that he and Danielle had been broken up, he was still very much in love with her. He tells the officers that his theory is that Danielle did run away. He says, I know her. I'm in love with her. I think she did run away. He says that Danielle expressed to him often that she was tired of feeling like a burden to her aunt and her grandmother, and that she may have run away to keep from bothering them anymore. Now, there's no record of anything that would indicate that they did anything to make her feel this way. But I will say, I feel like anybody, especially a teenager who had asked to go live someplace, would feel this way sometimes. I feel like that when I go stay at my parents' house during a hurricane. And I know that that's not the case, but like, I can totally see why she would feel that way.
Yeah.
Jamichael was super involved with her family throughout the investigation and through searches with Danielle. And they did search for her. There were search parties of over 300 people, and the whole town was looking for her. There were missing posters, and it was everywhere. The students at school, though, began whispering about the case because they had to go back to school. She'd been missing for a while at this point. And the police heard a rumor about an older teen named Derek. The story being told at school was that Derek tried to make a move on Danielle, but when she rejected him, he slit her throat and left her in the woods. So they dug into Derek a little bit. He did know Danielle through some of their friend group, despite the fact that he had actually dropped out of high school previously. He was working on going back to school, and when the police asked him for his alibi, he said he was home alone looking for jobs online. They were like, okay, well, let's see your computer. And he says, well, actually, I clear my search history every time I use it to protect from being hacked or scammed. And so the police were like, okay, rumor mill is going, no alibi, a dropout.
Not looking good.
Yeah, so then they got a search warrant. Now, when they searched Derek's home, they found a burn pit, a large knife, and 2 shovels that appeared to have blood on them.
Oh.
The detectives decided to do a field test on the shovels. And drum roll, please. The shovels did not have blood on them.
Okay.
And while his alibi may not have been corroborated, he didn't have access to a car. He didn't even have his license. They eventually had to rule him out as a suspect. And once again, we're left with nothing.
Okay, I thought this was going to be more of a straightforward case.
You would think.
That's not
nay,
happening.
I say.
Alrighty.
Danielle had been missing for nearly 2 weeks at this point. They finally got records of her phone, and they knew that it was last seen in a vehicle on I-90 because it was going at such a speed when it pinged. The last 2 spots, that they had seen it at, it had to have been in a car. But then it stopped moving, which indicated that it was somewhere on the side of the road and on the highway.
Okay.
They had found the sock, indicating she was at the creek. And at this point, the community starts thinking that this was purely a random abduction because everybody around her had been cleared as a suspect. And that, of course, results in fear and panic spreading through Hope Mills. Girls were terrified to go anywhere. Everybody was nervous. They didn't what do you think? How do you process that?
Yeah. I think because of our connection to true crime, I can't speak for you, but I know for me, when I see panic like that, I just always still have in the back of my head, yeah, but most of the time it's people are killed by somebody that they know. Right. So I don't really jump to that.
Random is not usually
if there's just one. Now, if you have like serial killer stuff going on or serial kidnappings where it's like one after the other, then yes, I completely understand.
Yes. So they searched everywhere. They had cadaver dogs looking everywhere, and they even dredged up a local pond, but they didn't find anything. Yeah. And the searches continued. It wasn't like they just stopped looking. But 2 weeks later, the community had done a balloon release, and all those around her, her friends, Caroline, Jamichael, her family, held each other close and tried to process the mystery.
Yeah. What do you do?
I don't know. I can tell you what her aunt did, which was go to church every single morning and pray for answers.
Okay.
So she did that on April 2nd. And on the night of April 2nd, Adam Brinkley, a new character in our story, was a veteran homicide detective, and he took a different route home that night. It took him over a bridge that loomed over the South River, which intersects 2 counties in North Carolina. He was an active fisherman, so as he crossed over what he knew to be a good fishing spot, he looked out to try and see if anyone was out having any action, catching anything good. He was going about 35 miles an hour, so not super fast, and he looked out and he thought he saw something that was a little bit weird. He called his friends at the station and was like, hey, can you guys bring me some binoculars because I think I see something in the lake, but I want to make sure it's nothing weird.
Yeah.
Well, I said lake. It's not. It's a river.
Gotcha.
With the binoculars, he unfortunately proved himself correct because he immediately identified that he thought it was black hair under the surface of the water. He called in the homicide team, and both counties showed up together to process the scene, since the jurisdiction was technically split in 2 over the river. Together, they recovered the body of Danielle Locklear 28 days after she went missing in March.
Oof.
She had been weighed down in the water with old-style cinder blocks tied to her wrists and ankles with neon yellow rope, and it was determined that she had been underwater the entire time she was missing. These were clearly cinder blocks from an older-style home or an abandoned area because they are not cinder blocks that are made that way anymore. They are
Gotcha.
Differently manufactured.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, no abduction. This had been a crime that was covered up.
Mm-hmm.
And someone had thought that they had gotten away with murder for a month. The next day, the medical examiner made their announcements that Danielle had died from asphyxiation, being choked to death. They had also found a matching sock stuffed into her mouth. This is when they realized that the actual death did, in fact, take place at the creek, which is why her other sock was left behind.
Mm-hmm.
They began theorizing why her body would have been moved from the creek a half hour away to the South River, when they realized that the South River was just a mile away from Jamichael's house.
Mm-hmm.
He cooperated when they asked him to come back into the station, and he stated 1,000,000 times that he had nothing to do with Danielle's murder. While he was there, the authorities used that time to search his home very thoroughly. And right outside, they easily found matching cinder blocks and matching rope at the property. They continued to deny it. Well, Jamichael continued to deny it. But they didn't technically have enough evidence to arrest him. They had, circumstantial evidence, but again, he still has an alibi on file.
Yeah.
So they let him go, knowing full well that he was the killer. They talked more with his family and figured out that while, yes, they were home, they weren't actually with him, and they didn't have eyes on him the whole time. They just assumed he was there.
Yep.
But his friend Dominic did have eyes on him the whole time. So when Dominic came in for questioning, they started telling him some of the evidence that they found, and he immediately lawyered up. He was like, give me an attorney right now.
I mean,
can't blame the kid.
Smart for him, not looking so good for Jamichael.
Right. 4 days later, Jamichael comes back into the station with a confession. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I mean, smart.
Yeah.
They got you.
Danielle had been telling him for quite some time that she was pregnant. And he and Dominic snuck out of the house and drove to Danielle's. And there he threw his wallet at her window to get her attention. She asked her grandfather if she could go down the street to Alexis's house, and they left, driving together to the creek. At the creek, he brought her there to make her take a pregnancy test in front of him because he did not believe it. He had told her, if you are pregnant, I will be involved in the life of the baby, but if you're not, I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
She began to argue with him, and in a rage, he grabbed her by the throat and allegedly blacked out. When he came to, Danielle was unresponsive and not breathing. He ran back to the car where Dominic had stayed, and he asked Dominic, told him what happened, and they loaded Danielle into the back of his car. In the back of the car, Danielle began to make noises, and it's unaware if these sounds were because she was still alive or just bodily sounds that happened. But Dominic, that's when he put the sock in her mouth so that they didn't have to hear that.
My dude.
Yeah. They threw her phone out the window and grabbed some supplies from Jamichael's house before putting her body in the South River. Dominic was originally also charged with second-degree murder, just like Jamichael, but it would eventually be changed. But there's some problems with the second-degree murder, because some people believed that it had been planned.
Yeah.
Including the authorities. Because, remember me saying that his phone was at his house?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you have taken your phone?
And how were you texting from your house?
Yeah.
He had used an app to schedule his text messages. So that seems really premeditated to me.
Yeah.
I think Jamichael knew that having a child would really slow down his growth in his life. And he didn't want anything to do with that. And if Danielle had not been pregnant, I don't know if we would be here. But he didn't even wait long enough for her to take the test because there is no record of her being pregnant. However, they stuck with the second-degree charge because they were worried that if they changed it, his plea would be gone and they would have to go to trial.
Mm-hmm.
And they were worried that if the jury didn't find him guilty of first-degree murder, that the step down would actually be manslaughter and the sentencing would be lighter than it would be second-degree. What's the difference, you may ask? I will explain the difference to you. First degree is premeditated, as we all probably know. Second degree is murder as a secondary result of an action intended to harm. And manslaughter is accidental death without malice, typically as a result of negligence. So normally in a trial situation, I guess in this area, if they did not find him guilty of first degree murder, they would not be able to find him guilty of second degree. They would have jumped all the way down to manslaughter, which would have resulted him in getting out of prison much earlier.
Right.
So that's why they stuck with the second degree plea, even though they knew that it was probably premeditated.
Yeah. I'm so distracted. I don't want to go on a political rant, but I am so distracted by that. I'm so distracted by...
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a whole thing. And it, in the end, it didn't matter because she wasn't pregnant. And again...
Yeah, but he thought
that
she was.
We think that he thought that she was, yes. So, Jamichael Malloy accepted a plea for second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 to 31 years, and he is still in prison. I believe that he is projected to be released in 2042. And in June of 2016, Dominic Locke was sentenced to a minimum of 6 years in prison after he pled guilty in 2015 to accessory of first-degree murder. He was released after spending nearly 8.5 years in prison because he did not get credit for time served, it seems.
Right.
Danielle's high school graduation honored her having a chair and giving her mom her diploma, and her family was drastically affected by her loss. Danielle was an only child. So
yeah,
this was, and I mean, she had lots of parents, you know, she had her mom, and her mom had been divorced, so whoever her mom had divorced was involved. And then she also was being raised by her grandparents, and her aunt was heavily involved in her life. This was a big loss for their family.
I am speechless.
I know.
Because
It is truly a horrible situation, and unfortunately it's not one that I feel like we'll know enough about Jamichael to understand why that was what happened. And
yeah, like, did he lose his temper? Well, it sounds but it sounds like it was premeditated, which means that he did it because he thought she was pregnant.
Right. So it's a sad situation. It's been just over 10 years since Danielle was killed, and her family did a lot of speaking out at the 10-year anniversary mark of her death, which is why this case had popped up on my timeline a while ago. But yeah, domestic violence is a horrible thing, and as always, it's so prevalent in true crime, and it's tough.
I'm sorry. I'm really like, my blood is boiling right now. Yeah, so lesson of the day, ladies. Now that we are in a time when being pregnant is borderline dangerous in general, don't lie about being pregnant.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
I just,
it's a sad one. But there were lots of twists and turns, and I hope that...
Yeah, no, it was a great case. You did a great job. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Don't apologize.
I'm bringing down the mood.
But that's the reality of true crime, is that sometimes cases hit a little different and they anger you, and yeah. But justice for Derek, because the man was searched, did nothing wrong. He was just trying to find a job.
Yeah, poor Derek.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Maybe he deserved a scare.
Maybe. I don't know.
We don't know.
Everybody said he was really nice, actually.
Oh, well, yeah. Then sorry.
They were like, he acted like a tough guy and like a bad boy, but he was actually
really,
actually like a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sucks. But he was cleared, thankfully.
And we did get justice for Danielle in the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, happy December. I'm sorry, it's horrible.
I hate it here.
Mom, I want to go home. Yeah. Well,
the earth is ghetto. Take me away, aliens.
Anyhoozle.
Okay.
If you made it to the end of the episode, please leave us a camp/tent emoji for Danielle's lovely summer vacation, and we will enter you in for Sunday shoutouts on our Instagram and Facebook stories. You can find us on Patreon for all of the goodies. Elysia, what do they get if they're on Patreon?
Yes. Sorry, I wasn't prepared.
It's okay, I wasn't either. That's why I threw it to you.
Currently, our $3 tier, you get the case bowl.
Yes.
Everybody gets the case bowl. But you also get ad-free episodes, live stream once a month.
Yes.
Outtakes.
Those are always so fun.
A private Facebook group.
Yes. And sometimes we throw other goodies out there. We have extra stuff.
Yes. And come the new year, we hope to be expanding. So, but you'll be grandfathered in.
Yeah, so if you join our $3 tier now, you're grandfathered into whatever comes next.
Exactly.
But there's also a free tier. And if you join our free tier, you get to vote in our monthly case polls. So once a month, an episode will come out and we'll say, hey, this was our Patreon pick.
Yep.
That's the poll that happens in.
Yeah.
And we use cases that you guys have already suggested. And you vote. And it's great.
Absolutely. It's fun. Yay.
We did it. We self-promoted. That's hard for us.
We're doing so good today.
Yes. And other than that, we'll see you next time.
Till next time.
Oh, also our patrons always get a shout out when they join. Anyway, okay, next time. Bye.
Till next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Burden of Proof Pod and email us at burdenofproofpod@gmail.com.